The Amazing Spider-Man movies were largely considered to be unsuccessful on their release, but since Spider-Man No Way Home, which saw Andrew Garfield return to the role as Peter Parker, there has kind of been a resurgence for that version of the character, with the fandom even petitioning for an Amazing Spider-Man 3 ever since. There has also been a massive resurgence for TASM 2, with people on Twitter and social media alike talking about how underrated the film is and how Andrew Garfield deserved better. And with this comes the question, should have the Amazing Spider-Man movies been integrated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And was it right to recast and get a brand new version of Peter Parker in Tom Holland? Let's answer that question. But before we get into that, I want to urge you guys to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure to join the best Spider-Man community in the entire world. We're pushing to 30,000 subscribers. Let's try and push for that goal. If you enjoy Spider-Man, you'll absolutely love it here. With that said, let's get into this, shall we? So before this whole conversation about Andrew Garfield being in the MCU, we have to actually understand that he kind of almost was. And we have to go all the way back to 2012 when the first Amazing Spider-Man movie actually came out. Now, a lot of newer fans won't actually realize this, but the Amazing Spider-Man movies actually were almost a part of the MCU even before all of this deal between Marvel and Disney and Sony came about. You see, the Amazing Spider-Man featured Oscorp Industries, in which it played a massive part in the film. And of course, the Avengers movie, which also came out in 2012, also featured New York City. Well, an interesting fact that not many people might know is the Oscorp Tower actually almost featured in the backdrop of the Avengers film, which meant that the Amazing Spider-Man movies canonically would have already been a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, this ended up falling through and Oscorp Tower never ended up being in the back of the Avengers movie. But it's interesting that this almost happened. And then we move 2 years forward after the unsuccessful TASM 2, Sony and Marvel reached an agreement in 2015 to put Spider-Man in the MCU. People assumed at first this would be Andrew Garfield's version of the character, and all the rumors were that he would be making his appearance in Captain America Civil War. Then it turned out a few years down the line that Andrew Garfield had never actually ever been offered the role of Spider-Man in the MCU. Andrew Garfield even went on to say, "No, I've never been offered the part of MCU Spider-Man." To be honest, all the ins and outs of what happened is a more tender conversation that maybe I don't want to talk about in public in a press situation. Which is kind of weird because all the rumors and speculation at the time, if you seem to remember, was that Andrew Garfield was going to be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it turns out this was never the case. My personal opinion on the situation, if I'm completely honest, I do believe that Andrew Garfield deserved a chance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Spider-Man, despite how much I love Tom Holland. But taking personal beliefs aside, and I'm sure some of you guys would have loved to have seen Andrew Garfield in the MCU, let's look at it more from an objective standpoint. Would the story have worked connecting the end of TASM 2 to Captain America Civil War? And the thing is, you'll be very, very saddened to know, it probably wouldn't have. During the time between the first Avengers movie, which was 2012, and of course 2014 when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 took place, the Avengers were based in New York. So trying to integrate Lizard poisoning the entire city and everything that happened with Max Dillon, aka Electro, into the Marvel Cinematic Universe would have been pretty impossible. Because these were city-wide events. These would have been things that would have caught the attention of the Avengers. Especially if the Lizard, for example, was trying to turn everyone in New York into a giant lizard. Likewise, you could ask the question, where was Spider-Man during the events of Avengers 2012? Surely if there was an alien invasion, Spider-Man would be first on the scene. So trying to integrate all of these movies, especially when they have city-wide events in the same place, all into the same timeline, just doesn't really work. They would have crossed over several times by the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I just can't see them working in the same timeline. But let's move to Civil War. Let's just say for a second, they somehow managed to figure that out. Would have Spider-Man's story worked in Civil War? Also, I don't really think so. When you really think about it, Spider-Man's story in Captain America Civil War only works because he's a young, naive, and impressionable version of Spider-Man. Gotta remember, Spider-Man has only had his powers for 6 months in Civil War, and Tom Holland's version of Peter Parker is really, really young and impressionable. And that's why Tony Stark was basically able to coerce him into coming to Berlin. However, I don't think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would have been this easy to crack. Plus, I think think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would have actually been on Captain America's side during the whole ordeal in Civil War. We have to remember that one of the reasons why Gwen actually died in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was because Harry Osborn knew Peter Parker's identity, and that's why he then took Gwen Stacy to the clock tower. If he didn't know that was Peter Parker and he just thought Gwen just somehow got caught up in this situation, he probably would have left her alone. So obviously Peter would be on the side of, well, no one can really know my identity because those around me are gonna get killed, like Gwen Stacy. So I don't think Spider-Man's story in Civil War would have actually worked. Plus, we've also got to consider, with the overhang of Gwen's death, it would have been pretty impossible to incorporate a cohesive story for Andrew's version of the character without overstepping his role in Civil War or overshadowing Cap, Bucky, and Iron Man. We've got to remember, Captain America's Civil War is a story about Captain America, Bucky Barnes, and Tony Stark. This story would not have been about Spider-Man. However, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 would have just come straight before Captain America's Civil War in the timeline, so Peter Parker would have been fresh off Gwen's death, and I think you wouldn't be able to do him justice or give him the story that he deserves in Captain America's Civil War. And there would have been too much baggage with the character going into that film for the film to actually handle itself. So I think the easiest thing they could do was definitely recast and then start a whole new trilogy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I think story-wise, they made the right decision because it would have complicated things, it would have made things unfathomable, and I think it would have just confused the audience. But recasting and bringing Tom Holland in and starting from scratch definitely was the best decision story-wise. Obviously, some people are going to say they would have liked Andrew's Spider-Man in the film regardless and in the universe, but I just don't think that's feasible. But either way, I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to a very good friend of mine on Twitter, Ronnie Pugs. He's basically making a video at the moment stating what he would have done if Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was integrated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's his first fan writing that he's going to be doing on his channel. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Go subscribe to him and make sure to watch his video when it comes out because it's going to be absolutely awesome. I cannot wait for that. If you click here, you can watch my video on why there is a fascinating dilemma with Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU at this point in time and why it might cause some problems in the future. I want to give a quick shout out to our members as well. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Your continued love and support for the channel is really and greatly appreciated. And with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and peace.